I stepped into the private dining room of the Oakwood Country Club for my son's family brunch. The morning sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, highlighting the crisp white tablecloths and the sparkling crystal glasses. I had booked this room weeks ago, putting down my own credit card to secure the space for my daughter-in-law Chloe's 30th birthday celebration. My younger son, Ethan, walked in right beside me, holding a neatly wrapped gift. The moment we crossed the threshold, the low murmur of conversation abruptly stopped. Chloe's parents were seated at the far end, sipping mimosas, while my eldest son, Mark, was busy inspecting his silverware. Chloe sat at the head of the table, wearing a designer dress I knew for a fact was charged to the emergency credit card I paid off every month. She lowered her glass, her eyes scanning me from head to toe with unfiltered disdain. She didn't even bother lowering her voice. She looked right at me and muttered, "This day was going fine. Until now." Silence settled over the room like a heavy winter blanket. I looked at Mark, waiting for him to defend me, to correct his wife, or to at least show a hint of embarrassment. He simply stared down at his empty plate, cowardice practically radiating from his shoulders. Chloe's mother let out a quiet, amused scoff. Ethan stiffened beside me. He looked at his brother, then at Chloe, his jaw clenching tight. He turned to me, his voice carrying clearly across the quiet room. "Mom, are you not wanted here?" A strange, absolute calm washed over me. For years, I had ignored the eye rolls, the passive-aggressive comments, and the clear message that I was only valued for my wallet. But standing there listening to the echo of her insult, the fog lifted. I smiled, placing a gentle hand on Ethan's arm. "Don't worry, I'm leaving." I didn't wait for a response. I turned on my heel, the heels of my shoes clicking sharply against the hardwood floor, and walked out into the bright Sunday morning. The drive back to my house was perfectly quiet. Ethan sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the passing suburban streets, his hands resting on his knees. He didn't offer empty platitudes, and he didn't try to convince me that Chloe didn't mean it. At 26, Ethan had always been the observant one, the son who saw things exactly as they were. "You okay, Mom?" he finally asked as I pulled into my driveway. I turned off the ignition, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. I am Ethan. More than I have been in a very long time. I wasn't going to cry. At 62, a widow for nearly a decade, I had survived far worse things than a spoiled girl's petty insults. I had worked 35 years as a high school administrator, raised 2 boys alone after my husband passed, and managed our finances meticulously to ensure we never struggled. What I felt wasn't heartbreak. It was a profound, exhausting clarity. Walking into my kitchen, I brewed a pot of coffee and sat at the island pulling a yellow legal pad from the drawer. For 5 years since Mark married Chloe, I had been the silent sponsor of their lifestyle. I paid their cell phone bills because it was easier to keep the family plan. I covered their premium car insurance. I handed over the keys to my late husband's lake cabin whenever they wanted a free weekend getaway. They viewed my generosity not as a gift, but as an endless, expected utility. I was the safety net they loved to walk all over. I picked up my pen and began to write. I didn't need to argue with Mark. I didn't need to demand respect from Chloe because respect cannot be negotiated. It can only be commanded through boundaries. I listed every single financial tie I had to my eldest son and his wife. The list was embarrassingly long. I took a sip of my black coffee, feeling the warm bitterness settle in my chest. I wasn't a victim, and I wasn't going to act like one. I was just a woman who had finally decided to close the bank. An hour later, my phone vibrated against the granite countertop. The caller ID showed the front desk of the Oakwood Country Club. I answered it on the second ring, my voice steady and pleasant. "Good morning, Mrs. Yvonne," the club manager greeted. "I apologize for the interruption, but your party has finished their brunch. Since the reservation is under your name, the server brought the bill to your son. But he mentioned you had a card on file to cover the balance. I leaned back in my stool. I did place a deposit for the room, yes. However, I did not attend the brunch, and I am not hosting it. Please inform Mark that he is responsible for his own family's tab today. Understood, ma'am. I'll let them know, the manager replied, maintaining his professional tone. 10 minutes later, the family group chat caught fire. My phone screen lit up with a barrage of notifications. Mark, Mom, what is going on? The waiter just dropped a $600 bill on the table and said you refused the charge. Are you serious right now, Chloe? This is so embarrassing. My parents are sitting right here. You're ruining my birthday. Mark, you can't just walk out and leave us with this. Pick up your phone. I watched the messages roll in, the sheer entitlement dripping from every word. They weren't apologizing for insulting me. They were furious that the insult had finally cost them something. They genuinely believed they could treat me like dirt on their shoes, and I would still happily pull out my checkbook to wipe it off. I unlocked my phone, navigating to the group chat. I didn't write a paragraph explaining my feelings. I didn't demand an apology. I simply typed one sentence. Yvonne. You made it clear I wasn't wanted. I assumed my money wasn't wanted either. Happy birthday, Chloe. I hit send. Then, without a second thought, I went into my phone's settings and muted the conversation. I placed the phone face down on the counter, picked up my pruning shears, and headed out to the backyard to tend to my hydrangeas. The weather was far too beautiful to waste on their panic. Monday morning brought a fresh sense of purpose. I sat at my home office desk, flipping open my laptop. The sunlight reflected off the screen as I logged into my cellular provider's portal. There it was, the grand family plan. 4 lines. Mine, Ethan's, Mark's, and Chloe's. With a few deliberate clicks, I selected Mark and Chloe's numbers. I didn't suspend the lines. I simply initiated a transfer of billing responsibility. The system generated an automated email to Mark informing him he had 48 hours to assume the financial obligation for those 2 numbers, or they would be disconnected. Next was the car insurance. My late husband had set up a comprehensive policy that covered all our vehicles. I called my agent, a lovely woman named Brenda, who had known our family for 20 years. Morning, Brenda. It's Yvonne. I need to make some adjustments to my policy today. Of course, Yvonne. What do you need? Please remove Mark's SUV and Chloe's sedan from my account effective immediately. They'll be setting up their own independent policies. Done. I'll send the updated premium to your email. It's going to drop your monthly rate significantly, she noted happily. Finally, I logged into my primary banking app. I navigated to the joint emergency credit card. It was a card I had opened for Mark when he bought his first house, meant strictly for broken water heaters or medical bills. Last month, Chloe had used it for a luxury spa weekend. I clicked Report Card Lost/Stolen, but instead of requesting a replacement, I simply closed the secondary user accounts. I leaned back, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. No yelling, no dramatic confrontations, just the silent, undeniable shift of responsibility back to where it belonged. For the first time in years, my monthly budget looked incredibly lean. I closed the laptop, feeling a smile tug at the corners of my mouth. The real world was about to introduce itself to them. By Tuesday afternoon, the reality of my administrative sweep began to land. I was standing in my kitchen rolling out dough for a homemade peach cobbler when the doorbell rang. I didn't have to look through the peephole to know who it was. The heavy, impatient knocks gave it away. I wiped my hands on my apron, opened the door, and found Mark standing on the porch. His tie was loosened, and his face was flushed with frustration. "Did you cancel the credit card?" he demanded, skipping any form of greeting. I leaned against the doorframe. "Hello, Mark. Nice to see you too." He ran a hand through his hair. Mom Chloe was just at Whole Foods. She had a cart full of groceries and the card declined. She was mortified. The cashier had to put everything back. Why would you do that without telling us? It's an emergency card, Mark, I stated calmly. Organic avocados and imported cheeses are not emergencies. And since you are both adults with full-time jobs, I realized it was time you managed your own groceries. But you shut off our phones too. I got an email saying our service drops tomorrow if I don't put in my credit card. Then I suggest you put in your credit card. I replied. He stared at me, completely bewildered. He was so accustomed to my endless patience that my indifference felt like a foreign language to him. This is about the brunch, isn't it? You're throwing a tantrum because Chloe made a joke. You know how she gets when she's stressed. It wasn't a joke, and I am not throwing a tantrum, I answered, keeping my voice even. I am simply matching your energy. You want independence from me. You want a life where I don't drag down your day. You have it. But my financial support stays with me. Before he could launch into another excuse for his wife's behavior, I stepped back inside. I have a cobbler in the oven, Mark. Drive safely. I shut the door, turning the deadbolt with a satisfying click. Thursday morning, I woke up early, packed a small overnight bag, and drove 3 hours north to the lake cabin. It was a modest, beautiful property my husband and I had purchased 20 years ago. It held my best memories, yet lately it had become Chloe and Mark's personal resort. They spent nearly every other weekend up here hosting their friends and leaving the cleanup to me. My tires crunched over the gravel driveway. The air was crisp, smelling of pine and fresh water. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. Immediately, I saw the evidence of their last stay. Empty wine bottles on the counter, damp towels draped over the antique armchairs, and a mountain of Chloe's expensive skincare products taking over the master bathroom. I didn't feel angry as I walked through the rooms. I felt efficient. I pulled several large cardboard boxes from the trunk of my car. Systematically, I went through the cabin. I packed up Mark's spare golf clubs, Chloe's paddleboard, their imported soaps, and the clothes they left in the dressers. I folded everything neatly. I wasn't spiteful, just thorough. Once the cabin was completely clear of their belongings, I carried the boxes out to the covered front porch, stacking them against the wall where they would be safe from the rain. Then I pulled the new lock sets out of my bag. I spent the next hour with a screwdriver removing the old brass handles and installing the new heavy-duty locks on the front, back, and side doors. I tested my new keys, ensuring everything was secure. I made myself a cup of tea sitting on the back deck, looking out over the water. The cabin felt like mine again. It felt light. Tomorrow was Friday, the start of Memorial Day weekend. I knew exactly what their plans were because Chloe had posted them publicly online. They were coming up here with 2 other couples. I finished my tea, locked the new doors, and drove back to the city. Friday evening, the sun was just beginning to set when my phone screen lit up. I was sitting on my patio playing a game of chess with Ethan. The caller ID flashed Mark's name. I let it ring. 2 minutes later, it rang again. This time, I picked up. "Mom, the key isn't working." Mark's voice was tight, layered with panic. In the background, I could hear the muffled voices of their friends and Chloe complaining loudly about the mosquitoes. "Which key, Mark?" I asked, casually moving my knight across the board. Ethan watched me, a small, knowing smile on his face. "The cabin key." "We're at the front door. I've tried the back door too. The locks look different." "Did you change them?" I did. A heavy silence fell over the line. Then Chloe's sharp voice pierced through. "Give me the phone." There was a brief struggle, and then she was on the line. "Yvonne, we have guests. We promised them a lake weekend. You need to tell us where the spare key is right now. This isn't funny." "I'm not laughing, Chloe," I replied. "There is no spare key for you. My cabin is no longer available for your weekend getaways." Are you insane? We drove 3 hours. Where are we supposed to sleep? She practically shrieked. There is a Motel 6 about 20 miles back down the highway, I suggested politely. Also, all the belongings you left at my property are in the boxes on the porch. Please take them with you when you leave. I don't want them cluttering the entrance. You can't do this to us, Mark yelled in the background. We look like idiots in front of our friends. You are adults. Handle your own social plans. I didn't wait for another outburst. I pressed the red button ending the call and turned my phone completely off. I looked across the table at Ethan. Checkmate, I said, pointing to the board. 2 weeks passed without a word. They were the most peaceful 2 weeks I'd had in years. I spent my days reading Visiting Friends and exploring hobbies I had long neglected. But I knew the silence wouldn't last. The financial squeeze was bound to tighten, and Chloe was nothing if not pragmatic when her lifestyle was threatened. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Chloe standing there alone holding a bakery box. She wore a tight, practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Hi, Yvonne. I brought your favorite. Cherry pie, she offered, holding the box forward like a shield. I didn't open the screen door. Hello, Chloe. What do you want? Her smile faltered slightly. Can I come in? I think we got off on the wrong foot lately. Mark is really stressed about the bills, and I just think family should stick together. I'm sorry if you felt sensitive about what I said at the brunch. It was just a joke. If you felt sensitive. The classic non-apology. I wasn't sensitive, Chloe. I was observant. I corrected her, keeping my hands resting on the door handle. And I'm not interested in pie. She dropped the sweet act, her posture stiffening. Look, Mark's car insurance tripled because he has a recent ticket, and we had to put our vacation deposit on a high-interest credit card. You've made your point. We're sorry. Now, can you please call Brenda and put us back on the policy? We really need the help this month. She didn't miss me. She missed my utility. No, I said simply. No, Yvonne, you have the money. You're just sitting in this huge house doing nothing while your son struggles. My son makes 6 figures. If he is struggling, it is because of his spending habits, not my lack of generosity. I looked her dead in the eye. You wanted me out of your day, Chloe. I'm out, but my money left with me. Enjoy your pie. I closed the solid wood door, slid the deadbolt, and walked back to my living room. I didn't feel a shred of guilt. The real explosion happened the first week of June. For 3 years, Mark and Chloe had been talking about buying a larger house in a pristine neighborhood. They always assumed they would use the house fund, a high-yield savings account my late husband and I had set up years ago. While my name was the only one on the account, I had casually mentioned in the past that I might use it to help the boys with down payments when the time came. Mark called me on a Thursday, his tone surprisingly confident. Mom, we found the house. It's perfect. We're putting the offer in tomorrow. We need you to wire the $70,000 from the fund to the escrow account by Monday. He didn't ask. He instructed. I was sitting on the deck of a brand new 30-foot luxury RV I had parked in my driveway. I can't do that, Mark. Mom, stop playing games. The market is crazy. We need that money now. It's our inheritance. It is my money, Mark. And it's gone. The line went dead quiet. What do you mean it's gone? Did you get scammed? No. I smiled, looking out at the gleaming fiberglass of my new purchase. I spent it. Ethan and I are taking a cross-country road trip. We leave next week. We're starting in the Rockies and heading down to the coast. I bought an RV, paid in cash. You bought a camper? Mark shouted, his voice cracking. With our house money. With my money, I corrected sharply. Money I earned and saved. You and Chloe are completely capable of saving for your own home. You just preferred to use my savings so you could buy designer clothes and country club brunches. Chloe is going to lose her mind. He whispered the reality crashing down on him. That sounds like a problem for her husband to manage, I replied. I have to go, Mark. I need to pack. Have a nice life. We hit the road on a bright Monday morning. Ethan was at the wheel of the RV navigating the highway with ease while I sat in the passenger seat with a physical map spread across my lap tracing our route. The low hum of the engine was the best sound I had heard in years. I hadn't heard from Mark or Chloe since the phone call. I knew from a mutual friend that their house offer had fallen through because they couldn't produce the down payment. They were forced to renew the lease on their current townhouse, and Chloe had been seen selling several of her designer bags online just to cover their new independent bills. They were finally living the life they could actually afford. I looked out the window at the rolling green hills giving way to the majestic gray peaks of the mountains. I didn't hate my son. I hoped eventually he would learn to stand on his own 2 feet and stop letting his wife dictate his morality. But I was no longer waiting around for that day to come. I was no longer their safety net, their punching bag, or their walking wallet. You good, Mom? Ethan asked, glancing over at me with a relaxed grin. I'm perfect, sweetheart, I answered, folding the map. I had spent my entire life building a comfortable nest only to realize I was letting vultures sleep in it. Reclaiming my space, my assets, and my dignity didn't require a loud fight or a dramatic courtroom battle. It just required me to stop opening my hands to people who only knew how to take. The road ahead was wide open and completely mine. For the first time in a decade, I didn't owe anyone a single thing, and it felt absolutely wonderful. Sometimes the hardest lesson we have to learn is that our generosity can easily be mistaken for an obligation. We spend so much of our lives nurturing giving and trying to keep the peace that we forget to protect our own dignity. Setting a boundary doesn't mean you stop caring. It simply means you start loving yourself enough to walk away from tables where respect is no longer being served. True family doesn't view your love as a transaction, and it's never too late to reclaim your peace and rewrite your own ending. If this story resonated with you, or if you've ever had to draw a hard line to protect your own peace of mind, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever been in a similar situation? If you want more stories about real-life boundaries, personal growth, and taking back control of your life, make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you never miss a new video. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.